Ladies and gentlemen, independent Americans around the country and around the world, welcome to a very special series of conversations with independent candidates from around the country, of all types, of all backgrounds. This is something I've wanted to do for a long time, and the moment is here. There are exciting, interesting, sometimes provocative candidates all across the country, now more than ever, who are running as independents. And we are kicking it off with one of the most, I think, important races in the country, one of the most high-profile independent candidates, and someone I've been lucky and honored enough to know. Joining us now on the program, the great and powerful Jared Young. Welcome to Independent Americans, sir.
Thank you. So glad to be here.
So you and I have been in touch over, the last few months because I've been tracking on your race, and I wanted to get to know you. But I'm gonna switch up how we do this show in a little bit, and just start by asking you, sir, where are you and who are you? Tell everyone who you are and give us some background on your personal story that brought you to this moment.
Yeah, so I'm Jared Young. I am living in Joplin, Missouri, so tucked in a little corner of Southwest Missouri, and running for the U.S. Senate here in Missouri against Josh Hawley, who's the incumbent in the race. I have a kind of interesting background. Most people grow up in small towns and end up in big cities. I grew up in big cities and ended up in a small town. So lived all over the country and all over the world. But ultimately, my career took me to Joplin, where I've grown a business the last 10 years and sold that business a couple of years ago. So I found myself at a point in life where I had some flexibility to try to figure out what to do next. And really, over the last 10 years, like so many of your listeners and so many people in the country, have become just incredibly disgusted and frustrated with what's happening in terms of our national leadership. I feel like our country is being put in the hands of people who put themselves first, and they put their party second, and then they put the country as kind of a distant third. And, I had a choice, as so many of us do. I could either completely disengage because I was so frustrated, or I could go all in. And I've been blessed to be in a situation where I can go all in. And the way I'm choosing to go all in is to run in this U.S. Senate race against Josh Hawley. I'm a father, first and foremost. I should have mentioned that. I'm a father of 6. I have 6 beautiful children and an amazing wife that we've been married for 16 years now. And they're my reason for being, and my real purpose in doing this is to try to preserve for my kids the country that I grew up in.
Mm-hmm. I want to go deeper on your race in particular, which I think is fascinating for a number of reasons. But I'm going to have a series of questions I ask everybody that is a part of this independent series and the candidate conversation series. So, Jared, why are you an independent? And how would you define independent? We're all defining what it means to be independent, especially this year when the presidential race is maybe going to dominate how people think about independence. But why are you an independent, and how do you define independent?
My entire adult life, I've been frustrated, I feel like, with the box that you get put in if you choose R or D. And a lot of political scientists kind of poo-poo the whole idea of independence, right? Because they're like, oh, well, they say they're independent, but they always vote one way. And I've generally voted Republican, so I would, I guess, be considered conservative-leaning independent, but I've always rejected the idea that you have to pick a team, because there are clearly good ideas and good people and good impulses all across the spectrum. And that's what we've kind of stopped recognizing, or at least the politicos have stopped recognizing. And it's become so tribal. And so for me, I've been an independent. I think I registered as a Republican when I was 18 because my family were Republicans. But once I left the country for a couple of years, once I came back, I've been an independent ever since. And I just really felt like I just saw early on, even at a young age, that this tribalism is incredibly unhealthy. And I wanted the freedom to be able to pick who I thought was just the best person, the best leader, the best candidate, and vote for them and support them without feeling any obligation to some sort of organization that wanted to box me in.
I want to go deeper into the actual race, right? You're running against an incumbent, Josh Hawley, who's a Republican, stood with Trump in that group of Republicans, and that slate of Republicans really strongly over the last couple of years, against Lucas Kunce, who is a Democrat, who's a Marine. And just to give folks some background, Hawley's raised something like $18 million. Kunce has raised more than any recent Democrat, but still only $7 million. And you've raised somewhere over $500,000. $200,000 or so is your own money, right? So you're putting your money where your mouth is, and you're going to have to.
Yep.
But talk about the race. I mean, Hawley looks like a strong favorite. Trump won like by close to 60% the last two times. I think I've met Kunce. He's an impressive enough guy, but I don't think he has a real chance as a Democrat in Missouri. And to put it in perspective, too, you know, in 2018, Josh Hawley ran against Claire McCaskill. He got 51. She got roughly 46. And the independent was Craig O'Dear, a guy I've known and I respect, who I think is an admirable voice for independence. He only got 1.4%. So what's your mission here? And what's your strategy for this race? Because as someone who's looking at this, it looks like you have no chance in hell of winning. But how do you approach that problem?
Yeah, I mean, when you're running as an independent, there's no doubt it's always an uphill battle. And yeah, if you look at Cook's Political Report or anybody else, they view this race as a safe red seat. You know, Kunce is interesting. I think I haven't met him personally yet, but he seems like a good guy. But he's been campaigning for 3 years straight. You know, he ran in 22, and then when he lost in the primary, basically immediately turned around and started campaigning for this election. And still, in any of the legitimate polls, he's struggling to break 30%. And so I think for any Democrat, no matter how amazing they are, there's just a ceiling for a Democrat in Missouri right now. And you know, we could talk about why that is. I have my own theories for why that is, but I just think that's the reality. Is it is incredibly difficult to win as a Democrat right now. But what we've seen
Can
with
I ask
Hawley,
you that? Why do you think that is? Why do you think that is?
you know, traditionally Missouri was a pretty purple state. I think Missourians are pretty practical and open to a lot of different ideas. And so when I moved here in 2015, you know, we had a Democratic governor, we had Claire McCaskill, we had a Democratic senator. But now every statewide office is Republican, and you have a Republican supermajority in the state house. And the reason I think it is because the Democratic Party has gone so far left on the cultural issues. And for Midwesterners, for Missourians especially, the cultural issues are important. So when we're talking about abortion, we're talking about transgender issues, and we're talking about, you know, critical race theory and a lot of the kind of race identity issues that are popping up. Those are issues where Missourians lean right for sure. Maybe not as far right as the parties, as the Republicans have taken it, but definitely lean right. And so that's what makes, I think, a lot of Missourians just decide, I cannot support a Democrat because, you know, because they're letting boys play girls sports. I just like, bam, I cannot support a Democrat. And so it's because the Democratic Party has gone so far to the extreme on those issues, they've lost Missouri voters. They've lost a lot of the blue collar folks that otherwise would support them.
And it's trending more red, right? Like Trump is strong in Missouri. He was stronger in the last election than he was in the first. And it looks like the state is becoming more red. It was a place that elected Eric Greitens, right? I know Tommy Sowers, who ran as a Democrat, as a Green Beret, you know, in Rush Limbaugh's home district and got annihilated. It's one of those places where, you know, I think Amy McGrath said to me, if Jesus Christ ran as a Democrat in Kentucky, he'd probably lose. Missouri is not that much different, right? But there does also seem to be an independent streak. So is that, talk about that and what you see as an opportunity.
Yeah, so here's what we saw in the polling. Before I jumped into this all in and committed, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars of my own money to it, obviously we did polling. And here's what we saw. First of all, Josh Hawley is surprisingly unpopular for a sitting Republican in a red state. He's underwater in his approval rating, and over half of Missouri voters said they want somebody else. So he's already starting off in a relatively weak position for a sitting Republican incumbent. Now, he still has all the advantages of a sitting Republican incumbent and has all the money in the world, but he's, you know, relatively speaking, he's weak. The other thing we discovered is that 70% of Missouri voters said they were open to voting for a third party or independent candidate in this race specifically. And I think that has to do a lot with Josh Hawley, but also has to do with, you know, 2024, we're in a different world than we were in 2018. I've sat down with Craig O'Dear and you know, he's been helpful and talked a lot about our race. Just the level of frustration with what the two parties are producing is at an all-time high. And I think a lot of us in 2018, myself included, heck, I I voted for Josh Hawley in 2018. So it's not like I've always been a Josh Hawley hater, but I think a lot of us thought we were going to see this return to sanity, after the Trump years went by, and he lost in 2020. I think we all just thought like this was an aberration and we're going to have a return to sanity, but instead it keeps getting worse every election cycle. And I think people are starting to recognize that, which is why more and more and more people are identifying as independents. In Missouri, it's 43% of the voters that identify as independents now. So we're the clear plurality. That doesn't mean there aren't incredible challenges to pull this thing off, but the situation is ripe for someone to be able to pull this off in 2024. So
talk about that if you can, Jared. How do you pull it off? Talk about what you're doing now to get on the ballot, right? Which is a major impediment. You're going to get outspent 100-1 here. You're scraping for media attention. You've got to be crafty in your tactical approach here to work with what you've got. The three of you, I said this to you once before, the three of you look like you could be stunt doubles for each other. I mean, you literally the most three look-alike candidates I've ever seen, right? Three white guys in their 30s or 40s, almost with the same haircut. I mean, you guys look like you could be brothers. So how do you get on the ballot, and how do you make a dent? And I assume get to a place where maybe you're pulling in double digits and you have an opportunity to influence the two of them, or maybe, to be a spoiler.
Yeah. So first I want to say, yes, I know we look alike, but once we stand next to each other, that'll go away because I'm about 8 inches taller than both of them. So I'm looking forward to being able to stand next to them on a stage. But
that's not a given either, right? Like they have to allow you on the stage, or what do you have to do to be able to get on a stage alongside these two, if they even debate each other?
In Missouri, once I'm officially on the ballot, I will automatically qualify for the main Senate debate. And
okay.
So to get on the ballot, I need 10,000 signatures in Missouri. That's the big hurdle that they put up. I'm there. I have those signatures. Actually, I have 25,000 signatures. I'll be submitting them on Friday. So as of Friday, I'll have done the work to officially be on the ballot. And so that's one point of kind of credibility that you have to check for, I think, the media to start taking me a little more seriously. I've gotten really good coverage in the St. Louis and Kansas City markets, which are the two biggest ones. Have a good relationship with the reporters at the biggest newspapers in those cities. So already pleased with the level of attention I've been able to get. But what we're going to have to do, independents face a number of big challenges. The first is convincing voters. Just people are afraid to pull that lever. Usually they're afraid that they're going to put a Democrat in office or a Republican in office, and that there's no chance of you winning. So you have to convince them on that one. You have to convince the donors. That's a whole different class, and they also hesitate when it comes to independence. And you have to convince the media. So the voter one, I'm a lot less worried about this election because, like I said, I think the voters are there. And as I crisscross the state and I talk to groups, I mean, people are there. They are there. As soon as they meet me and they hear my message, they're like, yes, I'm in. The challenge is there's 4 million of them, and I can't get in front of 4 million people just by 20 or 30 or 40 at a time. So that's the big challenge, and that's where the resources come in and where the donors come in. Thus far, I have 300 or 400 people, mostly from my personal network, that have been willing to contribute to me, and I'm putting a lot of my own resources into it. And so what our strategy is, we've gotten on the ballot. That was the first key thing we had to accomplish. And we've accomplished it earlier than any other independent I've ever heard of. Usually they're kind of scraping to get on the ballot. It's June, July, August when they finally get on the ballot. We're going to be on the ballot in April. So we can check that box, get that legitimacy right off, which will hopefully help us get some momentum. I got an earlier start than a lot of independents do. I quit my full-time job in July of last year and been working on this and coalition building ever since. And so, again, what I feel like we have to do is we have to get to a point in the polls where I'm at 10, 15, 20%, ideally 20%. And that's when I think the donors start to raise their eyebrows and say, hey, this guy could really make some noise. Missouri's a plurality state. All I need is 30, all I need is more than the other two, which will probably be 35, 36% to be able to win. So I don't need to get to 50%. So if I can get to 20 and point out, look, the voters are receptive to the message. The voters are there. I just need the help to get in front of those voters. I believe if we can get to that threshold with my own resources, get to that 15, 20% threshold, then people are going to start coming off the sidelines and help push us the rest of the way.
Your race is fascinating for a lot of reasons, but we could scenario plan in a number of different ways. And I feel like there's no way in hell that Kunce is going to get elected as a Democrat in this race. And it kind of harkens back to like when Evan McMullin ran in Utah. If he dropped out and supported you, like maybe you'd have a chance at taking down Hawley, especially because he's right of center. That's almost definitely not going to happen. If you drop out, do you think you take more votes away from Hawley? This is a question for RFK and all these other independent candidates. Do you feel like your base is taking more away from Hawley or more away from Kunce?
I anticipate taking more away from Hawley simply because I am more of a conservative. I think there are a lot of people out there who are voting for Hawley, not because they're in love with him, but simply because they view the Democrats as a much more dangerous option. Mm-hmm. And so when I show them there's a viable option out there that generally agrees with them on the cultural issues that make them so afraid, but isn't Josh Hawley, then that's the people I'm going to be polling, kind of disenchanted Republicans. There's a lot of them out there. Certainly, I need to do incredibly well with independents. We feel like we need to get 85% of those independents. We need 15% of Republicans, and we need 5% of Democrats. That's our winning coalition.
Jared, we're talking a lot about what you're running against and how you're running. What are you running on? What's your platform? What issues are you focused on in this race that you feel are important and can differentiate you potentially from those other two candidates?
Yeah, the biggest issues that I'm running on are the ones that I feel like there's broad consensus across the voter population, but we're not getting to any sort of solution on them simply because of the partisan politics. The biggest one in my mind of those is immigration. I mean, in my mind, there are two truths on immigration that most of us recognize, but the parties can't seem to get their heads wrapped around. One is we need a secure border. I mean, we have to be able to decide who's coming into our country, and as each person comes across, we need to decide, do we want them or do we not want them, and make that decision. That's clearly not happening now, and it's dangerous for our country. Not dangerous because I think immigrants are inherently dangerous. I think the vast majority of them are great for our country, but it's dangerous for us not to know who's coming in. Second, the second truth is we need legal immigrants. The way that our demographics are playing out, the way our economy is going, we need legal immigrants to be able to continue growing at the level we want to grow as an economy. I come from the business world, served businesses all across the Midwest. They are begging for more qualified workers. And other Western countries have figured this out. They are loosening their immigration laws, greasing the skids to get talented, skilled workers from all over the world to come to them. We haven't figured it out yet. So it should absolutely be possible for us to form a policy that secures our border, but also makes it easier for high quality legal immigrants to come here and strengthen our economy and strengthen the culture of our country. But we're not getting there. And it's purely because of partisan games.
What are two more issues that you're focused on in your race in addition to the immigration issue, which is, I think, definitely maybe one of the hottest issues, most pressing issues for most Americans? And your response, I think, is an independent one. It's like, look, you're not demonizing people. You're practical. You're pragmatic. You're trying to split the difference between what people would assume is the Republican who wants to send everybody to Guantanamo and the Democrat who wants to let everybody in with no rules, right? There's kind of a splitting of the difference that independents have an opportunity to do. And granted, I'm generalizing, but I think that's what people are looking for, is a kind of a Goldilocks scenario. Can you talk about two other issues maybe that are important to your campaign and to you?
Yeah, so obviously the economy is important to everyone. We are all hurting at the grocery store. We're hurting with how much our homes are costing. Just even though, if you read the Wall Street Journal, the economy looks strong, it doesn't feel strong to any of us because when I take my 6 kids out to the restaurant, even if I'm taking them to McDonald's, it costs me $100. Like it's crazy just how much stuff costs now. And so you can argue and debate about what is leading to that, but what I feel like we need to be focusing on, and is not getting talked about at all anymore, even by the fiscally conservative Republicans, is the national debt and the national deficit, Social Security, Medicare, this looming disaster that, because it's hard, it's complex, and it will take hard decisions. Nobody's talking about it. Nobody's willing to take the political risk to address it. And I think we need real leaders. They're going to go to Washington and say, okay, We've been making incredibly bad decisions for decades now that have put us in an incredibly bad spot. What are we going to do to get out of that spot? And it'll take leaders that are willing to educate their voters instead of just doing whatever they can to ensure that I'm not going to get primaried or I'm not going to lose an election. We need to be able to take the lead and educate voters. Hey, here's the consequences if we do nothing. Here's what I'm proposing we do. Yes, it's going to hurt. We need to be willing to do this pain now to not suffer extreme pain 6 years from now. So that's
Jared,
another big one.
Speaking of pain, this is a show that focuses a lot on international and national security, global security. Just straight up, where are you on Ukraine? What's your position on Ukraine? And what's your position on Israel and Gaza right now?
Yeah, that was going to be the third issue I brought up. So national security, and this is where I differ strongly from Josh Hawley and Lucas Kunce. I'm strongly in support of Ukraine. Really feel like we should be doing more there. We need to get the aid there. Frankly, I think we should do more than is even being proposed right now. I think it's incredibly important, not just for the principle. I think the principle is important that we have this democracy that was just starting to thrive, just turning the corner in achieving what we've hoped for kind of the whole world for so long. And then Putin came in and tried to squash it, and we weren't there. You know, we've sent billions of dollars there, so we've helped. We helped stop Putin from accomplishing his goal immediately, but then we kind of faded. I felt like from the very beginning, you know, the way you deal with a bully is you punch him in the mouth, and I feel like we didn't punch Putin in the mouth. We kind of just you know, held him back like this. So strongly in favor of supporting Ukraine. Obviously, there needs to be accountability with those funds. We need to know what's happening with them. But ultimately, when we spend money on Ukraine, what we're doing is we're paying U.S. producers to build weapons for Ukraine, so it helps our economy. I just think it's a win-win all the way around. I think China's watching closely. Iran was obviously watching closely, saw our weak response in Ukraine, saw the disaster in Afghanistan, and it's put us in this position where our allies don't trust us and our enemies don't fear us. And that's an incredibly bad position to be in.
Talk about Gaza and Israel. What's your position there? Another hot button issue right now in this race, especially if you're in the Senate. You know, you'll be voting on these issues. What's your position right now on Israel and Gaza?
Yeah, this one I have. You know, I lived in Jordan for a while in my early 20s. My undergrad's in Middle East Studies in Arabic. So I have this is an issue in an area that I spent a lot of time thinking about, and I have a very clear understanding of all the history that's led up to this. So my view is a little more nuanced, I guess, than your average person's, but people don't like nuance on this issue, as I'm discovering. I believe, look, Israel's made, I think, a lot of policy mistakes over the last several decades in the Palestinian situation that have, you know, led to a lot of ugly situations. However, October 7th there's no excuse for that. You know, there's any moral high ground I feel like the Palestinians might have had disappeared when you start beheading and raping people. And, you know, I spent last week talking to a lot of Muslim leaders in St. Louis, and, you know, there's disputes over the facts there. Frankly, they just rejected the fact that any of that stuff even happened. And so it's hard to have these conversations if you're operating on a different set of facts, right? But I believe that some true atrocities were committed on October 7th. A lot of innocent people were killed. I believe Hamas is an evil organization that doesn't give a darn about civilian life, whether it's Israeli civilian life or whether it's Palestinian civilian life. And so I think Israel is justified in deciding this time that they need to eliminate Hamas. And I think it's pretentious of us to presume to tell them how to do that and to ask them to show restraint, when I think if we were in the same situation as the United States, we would struggle to show restraint. Now, that being said, it is incredible tragedy that we all acknowledge that so many thousands of Palestinians are getting killed, so many innocents are being put in the line of fire, so many people are suffering, and we absolutely should be doing what we can to relieve that suffering. And to you know, help with humanitarian aid. I feel like where we really should be focusing U.S. influence, instead of trying to get Israel trying to tell Israel how to defend itself, we need to pressure them to have a clear plan for what comes next. Because right now, I'm not seeing any clear plan. Okay, let's say they accomplish whatever they're trying to accomplish in Gaza at incredible cost. What comes next? Because if their plan is simply to try to maintain the status quo of the last 40 years, this is just going to repeat itself 15, 20 years from now. And I feel like this is an opportunity for Israel to kind of hit the reset button and find a path forward that's going to lead to real lasting peace and not leave the Palestinians stuck in this awful limbo where they feel like they have no choice but to lash out.
Thank you for laying all that out. I mean, it would definitely be a contrast for Missouri to have someone who studied and lived in this region, in contrast to Josh Hawley. That would be a difference on day one. I want to ask you a question. I'm going to ask other folks who are running for the Senate, or for really any position. Number one, if you're elected to the Senate, who are you going to caucus with? Are you going to caucus with the Democrats, the Republicans? Bernie Sanders is not a real independent, right? He always caucuses with the Democrats. Angus King, the same way. Evan McMullin said he would not caucus with anyone if he was elected. What's your position on who would caucus with, if anyone, if elected?
Yeah, so that's a question I get asked a lot. Obviously, I think the answer really depends on what the world looks like in November. I mean, my goal is to come, and the whole reason I'm running as independent is I want to significantly change the way the Senate operates and the way that Washington operates. And so what I plan to do is I get to Washington, we see what the makeup of the Senate looks like, who's in control, how close is the margin. I will obviously speak with the leadership of both parties and figure out what path is going to allow me to accomplish what I came there to accomplish and to do the most for Missourians that I can do. So if that means caucusing with the Democrats, then that's what I'll do. If it means caucusing with the Republicans, that's what I'll do. If it means caucusing with neither, that's what I'll do. But just because I choose to caucus with someone doesn't mean I'm going to be a reliable vote for them. And I think that's what makes, Bernie Sanders, we think of him as a Democrat because he always votes with the Democrats generally.
Right.
And I just don't see myself, my policy views are too diverse and don't fit nicely into either box. I don't see myself being a reliable vote for either side. I'll just.
Do you think that's going to hurt you with independents and maybe with Republicans and Democrats who want you to say, I'm going to caucus with the Republicans or the Democrats or neither? I mean, the kind of the TBD, candidly, as an independent voter, that one for me might be like, so I won't know who gets you until you get there.
But if you're, from my view, if you're a true independent, then you don't have a team, right? So it doesn't care. You don't care as much who he's going to caucus with. The way you care is it's an independent mind that's going to make decisions based on what's best for the country, not based on what team he's picked. And so I just, yes, I mean, to answer your question, surely that will lose me voters, because there are some people that are probably thinking, yeah, I could probably vote for him as long as I know that he's going to, be with the Republicans, or I can probably vote for him as long as I know he's going to be with the Democrats. But that's not why I'm doing this. I mean, if I wanted to be a Democrat, I would run as a Democrat. If I wanted to be a Republican, I would run as a Republican. I just don't think we can accomplish real change from within the parties. People have been trying to do it for 100 years, and people aren't accomplishing it.
Last specific and technical question. We had Yemi on in the last episode, Mayor Yemi Mobilati from Colorado Springs. I asked him this. I want to ask you the same question. Are you going to endorse anybody for president? Are you going to endorse one of the independent candidates, RFK Jr., Cornel West, Jill Stein, Joe Biden, Donald Trump? None of the above. Who, if anyone, will you endorse for president?
I can't see myself endorsing anybody at this point. And frankly, I don't know who I'll vote for at this point. Still trying to sort out all that in my own mind. I see just incredibly, in my mind, disqualifying flaws with both President Biden and President Trump. Really struggle with Robert F. Kennedy. I admire his willingness to take on the Democratic establishment and keep on chugging, because I know how incredibly hard that is. I'm doing it myself. But he has a lot of views about the world that I really, really struggle with. So there's no obvious answer for me. And so if I'm going to endorse somebody, it's going to be somebody I'm really excited about, and I'm not excited about any of them.
When you say you don't know who you're going to vote for, when do you think you'll know? Because I find these people vexing to me, right? Like, and so I want to press you on this one. So Joe Biden, Donald Trump, you're not sure yet. When do you think you'll be more sure, or what will influence you one way or the other?
Honestly, for me, it might come down to election day. Let's see how things shake out. We have two very elderly men running. There could be health issues that pop up. You know, a lot of things can happen in a race. So I'm just trying to keep an open mind until we see what the choices actually are on November 5th.
Got it. Got it. Okay, last question. I'm going to try to do this with each of the folks we have a conversation with. I'm going to give you 30 seconds, 45 seconds, a minute. Make your case to independent Americans. In Missouri, obviously, you're making that case every day, but why should independent Americans across this country who are rooting for the independent movement, who are rooting for not just wins, but also positive leaders, right, who can represent our movement at a time when we're being defined often by others. You got a minute, go for it. Why should independent Americans support you?
Look, if we always do what we've always done, we're always going to get what we've always gotten. I say that over and over again in my race. And the thing about independence is we've been the ones that have been sitting on the sidelines, right? We've allowed our politics to be controlled by the most extreme voices on the right and the left, when really we make up a majority of the population. So what's going to take for us to seize back power? It's going to require us to get off our couches and actually step in and do things. Now we can step in and run as candidates. That's what I'm doing. You can step in and be a media presence. That's what you're doing. We need other people to step in and donate. And it's going to take all the independents around the country consolidating around a few promising independent candidates to really pull something off and make change. So I think, if you like me, great. Please support me. Don't just support me by saying, yeah, that guy's great. Support me by going on the website and donating money. If it's not me, then pick somebody else. But pick an independent candidate that you think has the potential to be a transformative leader and put your money where your mouth is. Because, like I said, I have 4 million voters to reach. They are receptive to the message, but reaching them requires resources. And so I just challenge anybody who's listening. Do you recognize the need for independent leadership? Do something about it. Do something about it with your resources and with your time. Pick an independent leader that you're going to get behind this time.
Thank you for that. I've said this to you privately, but I'll say it publicly. You've got my support. I'm no fan of Josh Hawley. I don't think Kunce can win, but I also don't think you can win. And I've told you that. So this is a question. One more question I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to ask everyone else. If and when you don't win, what are you going to do? Are you committed to this movement for the long term? Because it may take us a generation to achieve this change you want to do. What are you going to do if you don't win?
Well, there's no doubt I'll stay involved in the movement one way or another. At some point, I do have to go back to earning money for my family. I can't just remain an unemployed political candidate forever. So certainly I'm going to have to go back to some sort of career if I don't win. But there's no doubt I'll stay involved in the movement. I'm too invested in this and see the need and care too much about our country to just back away after November 5th. So I don't know exactly what the future looks like from here. And I won't have a lot of resources left after this to launch another campaign on my own dime, but definitely I'll stay involved and try to push and get behind others who are willing to make the leap. And eventually we're going to pull it off. There's just too many people that feel the same way we do to not pull this off at some point. I believe this year is the year we can do it. Aiming to prove you and a lot of other people wrong, but if I'm wrong, and that's fine, and we'll move on and take our gains and continue pushing forward.
Well, I want to celebrate your courage, your leadership, your sacrifice, especially with 6 kids, being away from your family and putting your whole family into this on behalf of what you believe in and on behalf of this movement. I think is really important, especially this year. You've got my support. You've got my 5-year-old support too. Over my left shoulder, you can see the Kansas City Chiefs helmet. My 5-year-old has decided he wants to go to college in Kansas City because he knows of no colleges in Kansas City. That's where the Chiefs are from. My other guy wants to go to Miami because he loves the weather. But you've got my 5-year-old, and I think you've got me, and you've got a lot of other folks that are going to be rooting for you. And I firmly believe that this is just the start for you. You're also approaching it in a really honorable and patriotic and forthright way, and I want to celebrate that too. You're not just a candidate that independents can root for, but I think that our kids can look up to as a father, as a community leader, and as a voice. So thank you for all you're doing. We wish you the best of luck. We're going to keep folks updated and tell them where they can find out more. But all the best of luck to you, man. Go get them.
All right. Appreciate it, Paul. Thank you.
And of course, stay vigilant. Thank you, sir.